You know that feeling when something goes wrong and your first instinct isn't to call anyone. You just handle it. You don't panic, you don't announce it, you don't even really talk about it. You assess, you adjust, you move. And afterward, when someone asks why you didn't say anything, you shrug like it wasn't a big deal. There's a certain kind of person who learned early that waiting didn't change much, that reassurance wasn't guaranteed, that help might come, but only after you'd already figured it out yourself. If that sounds familiar, you've probably been misunderstood more than you realize. People call you emotionally distant, guarded, private, too independent. They assume you don't need support, or worse, that you don't value it. But what if that independence wasn't a personality trait? What if it was training? There's more going on here than most people realize. If you were born between the mid-60s and early 80s, you grew up in a very specific psychological environment, one that rarely gets explained properly. Before constant check-ins, before tracking apps, before emotional vocabulary became mainstream, many children during that time regularly came home to empty houses. They made their own snacks, finished homework alone, waited quietly, not because it was dramatic, because it was normal. And when something becomes normal during childhood, the nervous system adapts. Psychologists have long understood that repeated early experiences wire expectations about safety and support. When a child repeatedly solves problems alone, the brain strengthens circuits related to self-reliance and threat management. At the same time, emotional expression can become less practiced, not suppressed in a traumatic way, just deprioritized. If no one is immediately available to soothe you, you learn to soothe yourself. Over time, that becomes identity. It's not that you didn't feel things, it's that you learned feelings didn't require witnesses. At the same time, the broader environment was unstable in ways children absorb even when adults don't explain them. Divorce rates climbed, layoffs became common dinner table conversations. News cycles carried Cold War anxiety in calm, almost casual tones. Adults said everything would be fine, but the world kept shifting. When promises and permanence don't consistently align, a child learns something subtle but powerful. Prepare internally. Don't assume stability. Build your own. Research today calls this defensive pessimism, but lived from the inside, it doesn't feel pessimistic, it feels practical. You hope quietly, but you plan for disruption. That wiring shows up everywhere later in life. At work, you don't expect loyalty from institutions, so you invest in skills instead of titles. In relationships, you don't rush to depend, you observe first, you test quietly. Online, you don't feel compelled to narrate your life. Visibility feels optional, sometimes risky. You grew up in a world where mistakes faded instead of being archived. Privacy wasn't ideology, it was default. None of this makes you superior, and it doesn't make other generations weaker. It simply means different nervous systems were shaped by different conditions. Children raised with constant supervision may develop stronger emotional language. Children raised with more autonomy often develop higher tolerance for uncertainty. Neither is better, they're adaptations. But here's the paradox that rarely gets mentioned. The same independence that makes you strong can make you invisible. When you don't ask for help, people assume you don't need it. When you don't broadcast your struggles, others assume you don't have any. When you handle things quietly, your effort blends into the background. Bridges don't get applause, they just hold weight. There's also a quieter cost. Self-reliance can become so automatic that receiving support feels unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. Not because you reject closeness, but because your body learned early that regulation happens internally. Studies on help-seeking behavior show that people conditioned toward early autonomy are less likely to reach out during stress, even when support is available. Not out of pride, out of habit. And habits wired in childhood feel like truth. But here's the part that matters most. You are not emotionally stunted. You are not cold. You are not incapable of vulnerability. You adapted to the environment you were given. You learned to think ahead because unpredictability was common. You learned to manage quietly because noise didn't solve much. You learned to rely on yourself because often you had to. And there is strength in that. There is resilience in being able to sit alone with your thoughts. There is steadiness in not collapsing when reassurance is delayed. There is depth in observing before speaking. At the same time, adaptation is not destiny. Independence doesn't mean isolation. Competence doesn't mean you don't deserve support. Being shaped by one era doesn't mean you're frozen in it. If anything, it means you understand something many don't. Stability is never guaranteed, but capability can be built. Maybe that's why you rarely need applause. You just need things to work. And if parts of this felt strangely familiar, there's likely more beneath it. More patterns shaped by moments that seemed ordinary at the time. Sometimes the traits we think are just how we are actually stories the nervous system has been telling for decades, and those stories are worth understanding.